So good afternoon, everyone, and it's a pleasure to have you guys joining me today, or girls, if there's any ladies among us. And I've been asked to give this talk about innovation, diffusion, and BIM adoption strategies. And I just want to start by telling you a bit about myself because I think you deserve to know who is talking to you. Um, and basically, I'm Zulfikar, you know my name obviously, but I trained originally as an architect, bachelor's and master's degree in Nigeria. But as you all know, most architecture degrees, you have to get a master's degree. But as soon as I got my master's in architecture, I knew I wasn't going to be a typical everyday architect. So I was interested in engineering and computing. So I did an MSc and then went for a PhD where I started specializing in things like BIM and digital engineering. And so nowadays I play a lot with the Autodesk BIM ecosystem and the Forge technology behind it. And I've started expanding my specialization into working with even the GIS systems because this is the next challenge facing the construction industry to be able to merge BIM with GIS, among other things. But it requires being able to work with two different kinds of data and workflows because the way BIM works and the way GIS works is quite different. And I also have some experience and interest in computational modeling, whether it is simulation or using computational tools like Dynamo BIM. So I did a bit of airflow and thermal modeling simulation, especially my PhD. So, but there are other things I'm doing now that have to do with like digital twinning and connected BIM. And lastly, also one of the things that, well, not lastly, but I'm also interested in VR. In fact, I'm a certified Unity developer, so I create VR games, well, serious games anyway, not for entertainment or PlayStation, but games that we can use, for example, to understand simulation of fire and maybe health and safety and evacuation and all those kind of things, which we can do very well in VR. And finally, my interest also extends into current emerging technologies like blockchain, where, for example, I have a project now where I'm interested in looking at how we can track construction waste during the demolition process, for example. In the UK, construction waste accounts for around 50 million pounds, I think, that's been spent trying to clean it up because people just dump construction waste in unapproved areas and it costs a lot of money to clear it up. So it's a big problem, and that's one of the things I'm also interested in. I hope so far so good. Everyone can hear me. So what is the agenda for today? Well, my presentation has two or three parts. The first part, I just want to talk about background and context of innovation in the construction industry. We'll start by looking at things like what's innovation and how is it diffused and why is most innovation digitally driven today? And then we'll take a quick look at the current state of the AEC industry. And by AEC, I mean architecture, engineering, and construction. In today's digital world and why we are generally lagging behind, and we'll look at some examples of innovation in the construction industry. So this is the first part where I will set the context on basically innovation. And then we move to the second part where I will talk about BIM as a concept and its approaches, you know, the way you can approach BIM in terms of whether you want to adopt it as an innovation, you know. So there are three levels I want to talk about, for example, the individual, the organizational, and the national level. And then what are the strategies that you need to apply when you want to adopt BIM for either the individual organization? And then maybe we look at some scenarios for developed and developing countries, because I know there's a lot of interest in BIM right now in developing countries. But the developed countries have, they've basically gone through the process, you know, over years. You know, they've taken maybe 10, 15 years to get to where they are today. And what can we learn from them? And how should we approach BIM adoption at either individual, organizational, or national levels? These are some good examples that we can look at. And then, of course, we need to touch on the barriers to BIM adoption, especially as it relates to our scenario in developing countries. I'll touch on some of the most important barriers that have been established in literature and best practices in terms of how you can get around them. And then finally, we'll look at how you can diffuse innovation in general and BIM using some frameworks and models that help you understand what BIM is or what innovation is all about. And by models, I'm not talking about architectural models, I'm just talking about conceptual graphical models that help us understand what is happening where. For example, if you know your RIBA plan of work is an example of a model or a framework, it just tells you what happens across the 8 or 9 stages of construction, you know, from the design up to the handover stage. So we'll look at some of those examples. And then finally, we'll have questions and answers. And I'm hoping to finish this presentation in about, say, 40 minutes so that we can dedicate up to 20 minutes for questions and answers. And unfortunately, you cannot ask me questions while I am presenting because it will be distractive. And I'm hoping that maybe at the end of the presentation, we can have some sessions where we can address questions or maybe even take comments from anyone who wants to ask a question or make a comment. Right. So background and context. What is innovation and how is it diffused? Right. So it is said that, hang on a second, my slides is going on. Yeah. So innovation is a process, okay, whereby an idea is transformed, is changed into a product or a service that meets either a new need or an existing need. But most importantly, it creates value, okay? So you take an idea, you transform it into a service or a product so that you can satisfy a certain demand in the market out there. Now, this is a classical definition of innovation. It has nothing to do with construction alone or engineering. It's just general. It applies to every aspect of innovation. But any idea that is innovative can be a brand new product, okay? But it could also be, maybe you take an existing product and you modify it. Or it could just be, you know, the way you manage something, the way you manage a process can also be innovative. So when we say a product, it doesn't mean that it has to be a physical artifact. It could be just a way of doing things like BIM, for example. It's a process. It's a way of, you know, designing, constructing, operating buildings using digitally oriented models. We'll come to that later. But you need to understand that when we say innovation, it does not have to be something that is physically tangible. All right? Okay. And also, I hope that people understand that innovation is not the same as an invention. Okay? Innovation is not always an invention. The creativity of an innovation could be the way you bring different systems or applications together. Because an invention is something that is perhaps completely new. Nowadays, it's rare that we have inventions, if I'm being honest, in my own opinion. It's rare because most things are kind of innovations because we have produced a lot of information, we have a lot of devices, a lot of systems that we end up just taking one or two things and, you know, bringing something new out of these existing systems that have already existed. Whereas maybe 100 years ago, there was no car, you can invent a car. Now you can't invent a car, you can innovate a car, definitely. For example, an electric car, you can innovate and create a new kind of electric car. A car that uses, I don't know, leaves to power itself. It's possible, but you cannot say you've invented a car. So you need to understand that difference between innovation and an invention. But the most important thing about innovation is that it has to create value. And that value can be many things to many people. Okay, it could be that maybe this innovation enhances the company's reputation, that, oh, these guys are so advanced, this is kind of way they're doing things. Or it could be that the innovation helps you to save time or money, you know, or maybe it improves safety or increase your customer base. So innovation, the value that you get from an innovation can be of different types, and it's up to the person that is wanting to adopt that innovation or to create innovation to decide what matters to them. Why do they want to do this? Are they just trying to be more profitable? Are they trying to create a safer process or a safer product? Or do they want to satisfy a market need and come up with something that people really want? Okay, and nowadays we see a lot of innovations that are just solutions looking for problems. And this is very, very important for people to understand. There are a lot of innovations out there, whether in construction or, for example, you think about social media, there's so many products out there that it's not as if we didn't have these products and we were hungry and starving and life was terrible without these products. No, somebody just came up with an idea and then all of a sudden we realized, you know what, we need this. We need this idea, it's exciting. Take something like Instagram. You know, what is it doing that we couldn't really do with before Instagram came up? But now they've kind of created something that is unique for you to be able to put social media things out there, and then people now can't live without it. But it was a solution that ended up meeting a market need. It's not like people were complaining, we need that kind of social media anyway. But the best way for you to understand how innovation spreads, how it can move from the point of, you know, origin to the point of being mass adopted, is using something called diffusion of innovation theory. It's a theory that was developed by a guy called Rogers in 1962. Basically, he said, you know what, this is how an innovative idea or a product spreads. And he says that over time, in a population or a social system, you can look at individuals within that population system and understand how they're adopting this idea or a product. So he did this work a long time ago in the 1960s, and it has become a classical reading and a classical example of how any innovation will spread in a society or in a system. By society, we mean, for example, a general population. If you want an innovative idea to be adopted by people in Africa or in Nigeria or Ghana, that's a population. But a social system could also be maybe the construction industry. That's a unique subset of society. Not everybody is part of the construction industry. So when you have innovative products for a social system like construction industry, then it's important to understand that group of people and how each and every one of us in that group will adopt this innovative idea. So what are these categories? Basically, Roger said we have 5 categories. We have innovators, okay? Then followed by early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards. These are the 5 classical categories of population that Roger said we need to understand in order to appreciate whether or not an innovation has spread or has been diffused. And I will explain all these categories immediately. So when we say someone is an innovator category, these are in technology enthusiasts. They are very, very excited about technology, okay? They're the first people to try out any new idea that comes out, whether or not it's successful or not, whether or not it's needed by society, these guys are ready to jump at it, okay? Anything that is new, that they won't mind taking risk, you know, to even pay some huge amount of money or spend time trying it out. They just love technology, or they love ideas or anything that is new. But these people are important because they help shape the future direction of the product, because they give some feedback. In fact, many manufacturers now will use those kind of people to be able to do what they call beta testing, like a software or a product. They'll give these guys this early version for them to try out and give them some feedback, okay? These are the kind of people that will line up at 3 a.m., you know, to just receive the latest Apple phone, you know, even during when it's raining or it's snowing. They don't mind because they just want to be the first to try it out. So these are the first category, and I would say perhaps these are the most important category for innovation diffusion. After that, we have early adopters. Well, who are the early adopters? These are your visionaries, okay? They tend to be opinion leaders. They're experts in their area. They've reached a high level of leadership, either in an organization or in an institution or in a country, and they are aware of some of the challenges, some of the pain points of that organization or industry. But they're also looking for opportunities to help make change, to move people towards a better way of doing things. So, which means they will be on the lookout for new products and new ideas. So you don't have to convince them that maybe there's a business case to make a change. And these people will be direct beneficiaries of the innovators. Once the innovators have adopted something and they see the benefit of it, the visionaries are the ones that will now take this and try to, you know, get it implemented, you know, in their own system or in their own group of people that they have influence over. After these visionaries, you have the early majority. These are the pragmatic people, okay? You will not find leaders among them because they won't take risks. They're not the kind of people that will go and spend some huge money trying to experiment with certain things. But these people will generally wait to see, are there any success stories of this innovation? Is there any evidence that this thing really works well, okay? That this idea or this product can actually be successfully adopted, but they will usually take up this idea much faster than the average person. But they will not, you know, be the first to experiment. But once they see some evidence that this thing really provides value, yes, they will be among the main bulk of people you rely on to massively go and start buying or adopting that innovation. These are closely followed by the next category, which we call the late majority. These guys are conservative people by nature. They're always suspicious about new ideas for change, but it's only after most people have adopted an innovation, then they're now, okay, that's fine. Let's give it a try. Enough people have tried and failed. We now know why we need this or why we don't need that. Let's go for this or not go for that. Finally, we have the laggards. These are your skeptics. They are traditionalists. They are skeptical of change. They are even more skeptical. They are more conservative than the late majority. Okay? They are stubborn people. They are difficult to convince that a new product idea is worth adopting. Okay? These are a very, very important category. So if I was to say, who are the most important categories of people you need to watch out for in terms of innovation diffusion, I would say you look at innovators and maybe the laggards. By extension, you can also maybe try and look at what the early adopters are doing or what the late majority is doing in order to see why are people not adopting your product? Why is it taking people a long time? Why are some people still drawing manually when there's CAD? These are even the most terrible kinds of laggards. If you have anybody who's still doing manual drawing in today's world, then maybe it's an extraordinary fundamental laggard that you need to be wary about, because, you know, CAD has come up since what, 1980s and 1990s, and now we are moving towards much more advanced ways of dealing with building information. But there must be a reason why some people are laggard. It could be a natural reason, maybe they just are natural skeptics, or it could be they have some constraint, and I'll talk about constraint later. Maybe there's financial constraint. Somebody wants to adopt CAD, but hey, he can't afford it. He doesn't have a computer, or maybe there's no electricity to run the computer. So let's not dwell too much into that. Just need to understand that we have innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards. So every population will have this category of people spread across in different percentages. This is how Rogers has explained it. We call this the innovation diffusion model that explains the percentage roughly of this kind of people that you have in a typical environment or population, where, for example, maybe innovators will just be around 2.5% of the population. Not everybody will be an innovator. The early adopters will be around 13.5%, early majority will be 34%, late majority maybe another 34%, and then the laggards will be like 16%. So if you're worried about your innovation not being captured or not being diffused, you need to start thinking about your 34% late majority as well as your 16% laggard. And together they give you what? If you add 34 plus 16, you get what? My math is not very good today. And that will give us what, 50%? Yeah. So if 50% of the population are either adopting an innovation lately or they're laggards, then that innovation is not really being diffused very well, because you want to be able to minimize these last two categories as much as possible. Okay. Now, other people have done some research in this area, especially relative to the construction industry. And there's a paper by some guys called Singh and Holstrom in 2015, where they looked at these categories and kind of customized it to the construction industry, where they said, okay, they now merged late majority and laggards. As you can see, there is 50%, and they say the early majority, the pragmatists, are 34%, and the rest of that. Okay. So it's very common nowadays that these last two categories, late majority and laggards, are lumped together as one group, even though actually they're two different groups, but their characteristics are so similar, you know, and the impact that they have is so much that you are better off looking at them as one main category. Okay. Moses, can you all hear me? I assume you can hear me, so I'll just carry on. Right, just give me a second. All right, excellent. So I just have confirmation that you can hear me. So let's move on. Right, so we have these are the categories that we have. And the idea is that you want to move people from the bottom category to the top category as much as possible. Now, not everybody will be an innovator, it's not possible. But as much as possible, you as the person who's trying to diffuse innovation, you need to push people from that late majority and laggard level up to early majority or early adopter level as much as possible. Not everybody will fit in, obviously, but that should be the ambition. You have as less percentage of people falling under late majority and laggard as possible. 50% is just too much, okay? It's just too much. If you have people, half of your population are late majority and laggards, then you are failing in terms of diffusing that innovation. So more or less, in other words, these categories show you the speed. That's very important. The speed at which people adopt an innovation. Okay, that's very important. Now, once you understand the speed at which people adopt an innovation, you need to only look at the 5 stages. Everybody will go through more or less 5 stages of adopting an innovation or diffusing this. What are these 5 stages? First of all, there's what we call the knowledge and awareness stage. You know, this is a stage where a person is exposed to an innovation. Maybe he went to a conference somewhere, or he was passing by and heard people talking about an innovative product, or, you know, he just saw an article somewhere. He just hears about it for the first time, but he does not really have complete information about this innovation. This is just kind of awareness stage. After that awareness stage, the person might be curious and he might say, okay, you know what? Let me go into the interest. I'm really interested in this. Okay. And you will now seek further information, you know, to be perceived about the value of this innovation and the potential that this innovation can have in his life as a person, or in his business, or in his company, okay, or whoever it is that he has control over. All right. After that interest stage, he will move to a decision and evaluation stage. In which case, okay, I've heard about this thing. I know more about it. Now I want to really, you know, I want to mentally apply this thing. Maybe it's a product, a new kind of entertainment device, for example, that you're trying to get for your house. You are mentally applying it. Okay, if I buy this new kind of TV and gaming station, I can put it in my living room. Maybe my children will play with it. Maybe they might not like it. Maybe the madam will say it's too expensive. You're kind of mentally evaluating this innovation more or less. So it could be a software you want to use in your company and you want to convince your boss. But before you do that, you mentally evaluate whether this thing can really help people do your 3D BIM or 4D BIM or whatever it is. You do that mental evaluation before you go to implementation and trial stage, where you can now try it out for yourself. Maybe you pilot it in 1 or 2 projects or in your business context. And then, you know, you're kind of looking at it, you know, to see whether it really works. You're kind of optimistic about it, but you are also cautious about whether or not this thing is something you want to continue using. After that, you get to the final stage, which is the confirmation or adoption stage, in which case you not only like this product, for example, but you adopt it and it becomes business as usual. You are no longer going back to the old way of doing things, or this is now the new way in which you are using, you're doing your business process. So maybe you are using one kind of communication system before, but you found out this new communications platform that does email, it does social media, it does Facebook, everything all together in one. And now you now stop using your Yahoo, your Gmail, because you now adopt this, and this is the way you ask all your employees, for example, to be communicating with each other. You know, so it could be a new system like that, and now it's now formally adopted by the organization. So graphically, you can say these are the 5 stages you go through: the knowledge stage, persuasion stage, decision stage, implementation, and then confirmation. Okay. Now, it doesn't mean that this is just going to happen in a linear way. Sometimes, especially when you get to that decision stage, you also might start to think about whether you want to adopt this thing or whether you want to discontinue it. If at that time, when you're mentally evaluating this thing, you find out that, you know what, there are so many obstacles around this thing. It could be a cultural obstacle. It could be a financial obstacle. Maybe you can afford the capital cost of this innovation or this product, but the operational cost of running this thing every day for the next 10, 20 years is something you cannot afford, then you know what, let's discontinue it. Or it may be that at decision stage, you reject it actually. Yeah, you reject it initially because you are thinking that, I can't afford this now as an SME or as a new company. But with time, you now find out that, oh, you know what, I can afford this later on when your business starts to grow. Then later on, you now go to the confirmation stage. So anything can happen from that stage 3, where you can initially reject or adopt and then change your mind later on. So now we also need to look at the characteristics of an innovation in order to understand why a change agent, or maybe that person who stimulates the organization, maybe that person who has that leadership role, what does he need to do to be able to make this innovation adopted in a very smooth way? You have that what we call observability, the degree to which an innovation is visible to potential people that will use it. If people cannot observe and see and evaluate that thing by themselves, then it will be very difficult for them to appreciate it. If you talk about something that's very abstract that people cannot try out on their own, then it's a problem. That's why software will give you trial versions for you to observe the software to see whether or not it's useful to you. Then you look at also relative advantage. To what extent is this innovation even better than what you are doing? Why would you want to adopt something simply because it's new? What does it offer to you that your previous process or product does not offer? Or what does it give to you that maybe will give you an advantage over your rivals, the people you are competing with for jobs? And then compatibility. There's some existing systems. You're using maybe a database, or there's a kind of process of working or some social cultural values that you already put in place that, this innovation might disrupt it so much. You have to worry about that. Is it compatible? Or to what extent do you need to make some radical changes to the way you do things? So that's also very important. Followed by triability. Can you really try this thing for a limited basis to be sure that this thing will work? Maybe you can ask for maybe some trial licenses or something like that, or maybe have 25 users try it over a 6-month period, or maybe just have a limited license rather than buy it completely. You might buy it for a short period. And this is interesting because many products of nowadays, especially software, are moving away from, desktop software that will just give you one license and you have it forever and ever. Now they're moving into the world of software as a service. So you can just subscribe to your software for just 3 months. If you don't like it, you leave it, because sometimes 30 days is just not enough. So when you try it for 30 days or for 90 days, example, and you invite other stakeholders to try it, then you can say, you know what, yeah, this is working for us or it's not. And then finally, there's complexity. That is the degree to which this innovation is difficult to use or understand. More or less, it's simplicity. Obviously, the easier it is for someone to use a new product, the better. Instagram is not going to be difficult for most people to be able to get their hands around. Maybe Facebook might be a bit more complicated, but Twitter is not that difficult to get the hang of. Once you know how to do your hashtags and send your tweets and retweets, basically, that's it. Limit yourself to some number of characters. So you need to think about all these characteristics of any innovation so that, you understand the nuances, some of the things you need to do to make sure that its adoption will be successful. So what this means is that all these characteristics are going to have some kind of pool. Some may dominate over others. For example, if you put them in a graph like this, you can see that some of these characteristics will have more weight or more importance. It depends on what innovation it is. For example, here in the figure that you see, complexity of a particular product is so much important that it overrides every other thing. But it could be that maybe the value that product gives, you don't mind the complexity. Or in some cases, it could be that you're worried so much about your stakeholders that you have to worry about their level of education or level of simplicity. The average user doesn't have time to spend, maybe to attend a 5-day training course just to understand how to use these softwares, in which case it's a no-go, because you know that people will not have time to adopt that thing because it's too complex. But in some cases, yes, complexity might be an issue. But sometimes it may be compatibility that is going to be the pull factor, that is actually going to be the weights you apply. So more or less, you can apply different weights. What matters most to you? Is it compatibility? Is it the triability? Is it relative advantage? No matter how simple a software is, no matter how compatible it is, if it's not going to give you an advantage or it's going to change your practice for the better, do you really need it? Are you going to move from using a spreadsheet to an SQL database simply because SQL is more powerful? Do you need it? Is it going to give you an advantage? So you need to think about all these things before you think about adopting any innovation. So there's some things that happen with a typical innovation, all right? And first of all, let's look at this graph here. It shows us what we call the Gartner hype cycle, all right? It means that for any innovation that happens, this is produced by a company called, it was developed by a company called Gartner. They're into innovation and diffusion of innovation and all those sort of things. And they're kind of consultancy, they're global. They're a very, very important company that I follow myself to understand the trends that are happening. So they came up with this interesting diagram, which says that when you have a new innovation, initially at the start, you have the technology trigger. Something will trigger it, maybe some software or some hardware suddenly available, and then it makes life easy. Everybody can do certain things. And then you go up to what you call the peak of inflated expectations, which means people will hype this thing so much that you think it can solve every problem in the world. And this is peak of inflated expectation, because many people will, well, not many people, some people will overinflate the deliverables that is achievable from this innovation. Okay. But then all of a sudden, you go down to what we call the trough of disillusionment, because the reality will hit people. They've already adopted this thing. They try to use it. They now find out that it's not quite what they need. It's not quite what they expected. So they're not disillusioned. So they're now going to this dip or this trough of disillusionment. And then once they get there, they now go towards what they call the slope of enlightenment. Now you know the limitations of this product, or some of the obstacles, some of the barriers of this innovation. So that slope of enlightenment is where you now learn your lessons. You now learn that it's not everybody that you should use this software in your company. Maybe only certain people should use it. Or you now learn that maybe you shouldn't use it for this kind of projects, or for this kind of systems, or this kind of scenario. You are now better educated about that software or that product or that service. And then you now start going towards what you call your plateau of productivity. You are now using it in such an optimum way that you are already you're getting value after that product. So this is a kind of hype cycle that they say most innovations go through. Whether it's a car, whether it's a software, whether it's a device, most products will go through this sort of hype cycle. And this other graph here just shows a more detailed overview of what happens in a typical Gartner hype cycle. Okay, I don't want to go too much into this because I believe you can easily find this on the web, or maybe the slides might be available to you guys later. But you can see that there's certain things that will happen at certain stages that that will make you understand what is going on within the Gartner hype cycle and what you can do once you see yourself, for example, falling into the trough of disillusionment. What are the things that makes people fall into that trap? Who are the people that you need to talk to that will help you get out of that trough of disillusionment? This is very, very helpful. Okay. Now, going back to this model of innovation and diffusion, this Rogers model, I want you to look at this and understand that any person has a choice, or any organization has a choice. You can sit down and say, you know what, we'll wait for everybody to do it, in which case you can be a laggard. Maybe it's not a problem for you. You're happy to be a laggard. That's fine. Some people don't want to be competitive. Some people just want to be the average Joe, or even one of those people who are dragging the industry backwards. Fine. Or you can decide to be an innovator, which means you go to the extreme end. You want to have a kind of small research and development outfit or unit in your organization. Or you as an individual also do your own a little bit of R&D as an individual level to experiment with things and find out how this new innovation can work for you in your own scenario. Okay? But at the very least, in my opinion, you should try to be an early adopter. Innovators need a lot of resources to be able to, and time to be able to experiment with things. But most people can afford to be early adopters if they really care, because most products are innovated. Usually they will give you some testing or piloting stage, maybe, for example, if you're thinking about using a particular material in your construction work, maybe they'll give you a sample to try out, maybe a new kind of window or a new kind of air conditioning system. The manufacturer might give you a sample trial, or even a software, for example. You can try it out as be an early adopter of that, whatever. But the reality, like I've said, the 50% is that the average organization is operating at early majority speed. Okay? But are you average? That's the question. As a person, as a company, do you want to be average? I think most people will agree that being average will not give you competitive advantage. So in which case you need to try and move to early adopter stage if you cannot be an innovator. Okay? But unfortunately for us, most of the participants in the AEC industry are either late majority or laggards. That's just the reality. Most of us are late majority or laggards for many reasons, which I'll explain as my presentation goes on. So you as a person now, you have to ask yourself the hard question: where am I in this pyramid? Or you can say, who is a laggard in my organization? You need to identify those kind of people. It could be you. You might be the one who is actually the laggard, and you might be the boss, in which case the organization probably is going to be in trouble. Because if the person who's supposed to show leadership is a laggard, then it means every time maybe a brilliant employee comes up with an idea about a new product, you might not be interested in it because you are generally a laggard. So you need to be able to be truthful to yourself, find out where you are in this pyramid, and see what you need to do to move to the next level. Like I've said, it's not possible for everybody to go to the innovator stage, but you can try to be an early adopter. Okay, so you should aim to be here, somewhere between early adopter and innovator. Now, having said that, apart from laggards, there's another problem we face in today's world, where we have a concept called digital immigrants and digital natives. Because there's a concept called digital divide. a divide that separates, it's a kind of generational divide that separates those who are digital immigrants from those who are digital natives. Your digital natives are the ones that were born in the early 2000 and above. They are your millennials. The digital immigrants are people like myself who, with time, we were kind of immigrating from one technology to the next, and we actually saw we saw the evolution of mobile technology from your Nokia 3310 to your touch screen. But the kids of these days, all they know is a touch screen. Okay, so these are some of the characteristics of digital immigrants and digital natives. I don't want to go through everything, but I just want to show you some major characteristics. Like a digital immigrant is the kind of person in today's world that would rather communicate in person, but a digital native is probably fond of his phone and tablets and laptops. He's always there. That's how he communicates. That's to him is normal. Okay. A digital immigrant might prefer to use logic or control release of information. He doesn't want to be overloaded. But a digital native, he doesn't mind opening 5 windows and running 3 or 4 software at the same time. He's used to it. Okay. And a digital immigrant will prefer to maybe talk to a few people at the same time, not more than a handful. But a digital native, he doesn't mind. He's used to social media, WhatsApp, Facebook, where you can communicate with 100 people from at the same time from your social media network. Yeah. And digital immigrants tend to value their private and personal space, but digital natives, they don't mind. In fact, they actually perform better when network because they are a social generation. They are used to doing things in social networking. So this is important because once you identify who is a digital immigrant or digital native in your organization, you can customize, whatever it is you want to do, whatever innovation you want to bring to suit them. And you can understand maybe why they may support or be resisting some of the innovation that you're trying to bring in. Okay. So let's quickly go through the current stage of the industry then. It is acknowledged that construction industry overall around the world is one of the least digitized industries, believe it or not. In fact, we're only slightly better than agriculture and hunting. I want you to let that sink in. Construction is only slightly better than people who hunt buffalo and antelopes. That is how crude we are. Don't look at what the UK is doing or what France and Germany and US is doing in terms of BIM. Globally, if you are to sum the whole construction industry globally, we are only slightly better than agriculture and hunting. Look at this diagram here. And you can see all these various industries from ICT to finance to wholesale, manufacturing, oil and gas. And you can see construction just above agriculture and hunting. We are only slightly better. Okay? That's very indicting. It's telling. So nowadays, when you see a company in construction bragging to a client, oh, don't worry, this project, we're going to give you BIM. We're going to give you BIM. That's nonsense. In relative terms, that's like your bank telling you, we're going to give you a mobile app or internet banking. If your bank says it's going to give you mobile banking, you won't be impressed. Because for them, it's not business as usual. That is kind of ambition we should have. Do not be bragging to your customers that you're going to give them BIM. That's nonsense. It should be the way we should be doing things. But because we're so backward, we are just above agriculture and hunting. That's why we think that BIM is a state-of-the-art, elitist, fancy thing that we can make extra money from our clients for. It shouldn't be like that. Okay? So BIM should be business as usual. And as we move into the information and data-driven world, we have other things that are coming together with BIM, like smart buildings, sensors, Internet of Things, VR, and drones and the rest of that. And you have to be aware of all these things. These are the things that will help us move away from agriculture and go up towards manufacturing, more or less upwards towards this graph that we see on the right-hand side. So, and they also say that data is the new oil. And there's something called Industry 4.0, which is the next generation of the Industrial Revolution. What does this mean for BIM? We need to think about that. And we also need to understand that most innovations, almost any innovation you can think about today, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in agriculture, in construction, most innovations will be data-driven or inclined towards technology of some sort, including BIM. All right? Is data or technology-driven? It's very, very important. So the technology readiness of a country, the technological readiness of an individual organization will determine how easy it is for it to adopt BIM or any other innovation for that matter. So if your company is not used to digital technology or you're not doing things digitally, you're going to struggle with BIM. Forget about CAD even, So this graph just shows you quickly, globally, the kind of picture that we have for some countries that have been sampled in terms of how digital ready they are. We have what we call the watch out countries. These are countries that face significant barriers in terms of digitization, they have low momentum in terms of digitization. You have the countries like Egypt, South Africa, Peru, Pakistan. And then you have the breakout countries. These are countries that, well, they are low scoring, but they are evolving rapidly. You have the Philippines, the Cameroon, Bangladesh, Kenya. And then you have the standard countries. These are countries that are way out there doing far more advanced things that the average country is doing, like the New Zealand, the Singapore, and the UAEs, Dubai's, and the rest of that. And then you have these stall out countries. These guys have advanced, but they stall out. They kind of plateau, they reach a peak, and they're just looking for new ways to be more advanced, but they've kind of like reached a kind of a plateau, you know, so they stalled out. So every country will fall into one of these quadrants, and it does not mean that every individual organization in that country falls that. In some watch out countries, you might have organizations that are actually doing some standout things. It's possible, but generally this is how countries have been categorized. So in summary, we can say that AAC companies use technology in many ways. For example, the leading companies in the world who are using technology, you find that 42% of them are using drones to monitor the status of construction, among other things. Okay? When I say monitor status of construction, it means the construction work going on, or even the people, monitor the people that are doing the construction work in terms of health and safety and whether they're being productive or not. 30% of them are using robotics and automated technology. 65% of companies are using remote monitoring on site. Okay? 30% of them are using RFIDs to track equipment and materials and even people. 17% of them are using smart sensors to track people on site. And 61% of them are using BIM, a majority of their projects. So you can see that BIM is just one aspect of some of the leading technologies being used out there. Now, there's some people that will make you think that all these things are BIM. No, you have to be careful. Some of these things are BIM compatible, they are not necessarily BIM. All right? What they have in common is that they're digital technologies. All right? And this is how the leading companies are using them. So you need to be able to judge yourself in terms of to what extent are you ready to use drones, or is it applicable to you, or robotics or whatever. It doesn't mean everybody must use RFID, but it gives you an idea of some of the leading companies that are probably innovators or early adopters. This is what they are doing. Okay. And in terms of the project's life cycle, we can say that these technologies I've mentioned, this is how they apply. Some of them are mostly useful for the design stage. Some of them apply to construction stage. Some of them apply to design, construction, and operation stage. Okay, like sensors. You can use sensors in the construction and operation stage. You hardly use sensors at the design stage anyway. Okay, so this is just for you to understand that whatever technology you're trying to adopt, think about its usefulness. Is this something that you want to only use at design, or is it something that can apply throughout after you finish the design stage? So I want to quickly overview some innovations that are out there. Like we have exoskeletons that enable people to pick up very heavy things on construction site, things that maybe you need 10 people or a forklift to lift. Now you can have one person with an exoskeleton doing that. You have smart helmets that can give you augmented reality to show you how to operate a machinery, for example. And you have smart boots that can track workers on site to know where they are, whether they're working fast or slow, or whether they're static. And we have VR being used, for example, for health and safety. You know, this is very important, especially in the UK, where health and safety is a big deal. And you can immerse yourself in a construction site and understand the hazards that may be the workers on site may be facing. And then there are dashboards that can collect all some of the data that goes into your BIM models and present it to you in a way that was not possible before, where you can see some graphs and charts that shows you this distribution of your space, like space programming now for architects. This is very, very helpful. Okay. And then we have some exciting, some other dashboards that show you what's happening in terms of health and safety, as well as you know, a combination of many of these things that can work in different scenarios. And you can see from this diagram here that BIM is just one of many exciting technologies that is out there. 3D scanning is out there, cloud computing is there, big data analytics, 3D printing, all these exciting innovations that you can use. You don't have to wait for it to be mandated or to become business as usual by everybody else. You can quickly adopt one and move on with it. So in terms of the UK, I know I'm running a bit short of time, but I'll try to rush this through quickly, guys. They have a vision to create a digital built Britain, where you can think about digitization from the onset up to the end of the life cycle of the building. And I don't want to dwell too much on it, but all those technologies I showed you earlier can be applied at different stages. And this is a vision of the UK. And for an individual or an organization, you need to understand that innovation does not happen because of a few people that are intelligent or they're brilliant and they're the ones that innovate. Successful innovation will happen because you're able to bring different ideas and different people from different backgrounds and make something that wasn't possible yesterday possible today. So it requires collaboration. And some of the areas where you need to think about innovation include strategy and leadership. You need to have that kind of strategic plan and leadership. Someone has to provide that from the onset. Otherwise, you might just be doing things randomly. And you might have cultural problems, cultural challenges, where you need to think about what the obstacles and barriers that people are facing. Think about your migrants and your laggards. And you need to think about your processes and your tools. What are the tools they're using today, and how compliant is it for the tools of tomorrow and the rest of that? Okay, so this is the second part of my presentation. It's a quick one. I just want to rush through BIM as a concept in terms of now, how do we take BIM as an innovation, and how do we apply it in our daily lives as professionals in the built environment? So quickly, BIM information, they say, is like a letter to a builder, telling him exactly what you want him to do. So when we produce models or with drawings or whatever, we are just trying to tell somebody down the line, this is what we want from you in order to build this thing, okay? And this was a 20th century architect that made this statement. So the whole idea of drawing or modeling is to convey information to people who build it out there. And sometimes the information could be drawings, it could be models, it could be a schedule, it could be cost estimate or bill of quantities. These are all different letters that we write to each other collectively or as individuals. Obviously, the more clarity you have in the letter, the better. Some people will have fuzzy drawings or drawings that don't have enough details for the contractor to build. Then that means you have a letter that is not clear. So we want to try and avoid that. So that's the whole principle of building information. Now, having said that, if you try to define BIM, you find that there are so many definitions out there because it's an innovation, isn't it? It came about formally in the last 15 to 20 years. And the BIM task group in the UK, for example, said you can spend 1 year just trying to define BIM, but you might not be wiser after that 1 year, because there's so many interpretations out there. And these are just some samples of some definitions that are out there. Some say it's a digital representation of a physical asset. Some say it's a rich information model with multiple data sources. I don't want to go through it in detail. Some said it's a technology. And some have said it's an environment, it's a scenario that provides smarter and better assets for low carbon economy. Some say it's a value creating collaboration for the life cycle of a building, okay? So the BIM task group have actually said rightly that it's often easier to say what BIM isn't than to say what it is. That's why when we have our debates on WhatsApp, some people say this is not BIM. I try to say, look, be careful. Don't be too stubborn about your own understanding of BIM, okay? But one thing we know is that digital content is central to BIM. The technology aspect is central to BIM. And I've always said that BIM is not technology, BIM is not software, but without technology and digital content, we cannot do BIM, okay? So you also understand that some of the definitions that I showed earlier refer to BIM as a verb, like build information modeling, whereas some of them refer to BIM like a noun, like a thing, build information model, which is valid as well, okay? So my favorite definition is to say BIM is a process that is underpinned by technology that has changed the way we build things, the way we design things, the way we analyze construction, the way we manage buildings, okay? And this understanding makes it flexible for me to be able to appreciate some of the previous technologies that we have, while also keeping in mind some of the technologies that will come tomorrow that we don't know yet, or that we haven't quite used very well, like Internet of Things and artificial intelligence. These are evolving things. We haven't quite got our handle around it in the built environment. So we need to be very wary of what we think about BIM in that regards, okay? So more or less, BIM is work in progress. As an innovation, it is not a finished artifact, okay? It's not like some smart people sat down 50 years ago and decided that we're going to do BIM in 2020 or whatever. No, over the years, different innovations came together and we formally called it BIM, and we are going to keep evolving BIM until we get there. And this is how we've evolved from drawing manual lines to doing CAD-driven lines to extruding things in 3D and then now adding data to the models. And then we're now adding sensors and the rest of them, okay? And this is what the UK sees as its own vision of BIM, where they say, if you look at the drawings and the 3D models, we are evolving from level 0, level 1, level 2, and level 3. It's just a way of mapping our journey as an industry from the 1990s, for example, up until 2020, for example, going forward. I don't want to delve too much on this. So going forward, if you are to look at BIM as an innovation, all right, and we look at our adoption categories, we can say that those who are laggards of today, they still think that CAD is a wonderful thing, all right? And maybe they're using 3D for animation, or if they're using something like Revit, they're using only Revit and just lonely BIM. They're not collaborating with anyone. If they're collaborating at all, they are using Dropbox or Google Drive, or they're sending email attachment, and that's not proper collaboration in today's world. But at least it is something that they are used to. Okay, so your early pragmatists or your early majority of pragmatists have moved beyond using lonely BIM. They're using 4D, 5D BIM. They're collaborating through BIM 360 or accommodated environments like core projects, and they maybe have some virtual reality technology that they're using as well. Your early adopters in today's world are using 6D BIM, which means they're delivering a facility that has integrated technology such that the facility manager has a rich model that he can use to manage the building. They're also using drones in their workflows. They're using smart and wearable systems and they're visualizing data using dashboards like I showed you earlier. Whereas your innovators of today are already moving towards using artificial intelligence and machine learning, and they're already looking at things like smart cities and combining BIM and GIS. They're already looking far ahead of the single building. They're trying to integrate many things together. Okay, so believe it or not, the innovators and early adopters of today, what they are doing is what your laggards will be doing in 10 or 15 years time, or maybe 20 years time. So that's how we keep changing. Okay, what is innovative today will be a laggard thing of the next 20 years, because those innovators will move into something much more sophisticated. So you need to understand that, okay? And this is just another overview of how the UK sees its journey for BIM, where they have what they call the golden thread of information. And I'm not going to dwell too much on this, but just to show you some of the key things that are digital, like the 3D libraries, like the clash detection, like common data environment, 4D BIM, and maybe being using level 2 processes and standards to enable the exchange of information. So going forward, I have to round this up. We can say that there are levels of innovation, adoption of innovation, okay, of BIM or any innovation in general. But in terms of BIM, you can adopt BIM at an individual level, and this is the most crucial level because it is people that will collaborate, not technology. Revit does not talk to Tekla. It is people that will talk to each other, okay? Resistance to change is something you have to worry about because some people, like digital immigrants might resist moving from one technology to the next one. So you have to keep upscaling people and make them go through continuous professional development. But the easiest way to find laggards is to look at individuals. That's not to say an organization cannot be a laggard organization, but organization is a laggard organization simply because it is populated by what? Laggard individuals. Now, at the organizational level, this is where formal adoption can start to take shape, where you can have like industry standard and workflows, where you can buy software at an industry level, for example. This is the best place to implement innovation, where you can try to be a leader, first among equal, right? But like I said earlier, if you're led by a laggard, you're going to be in trouble. And then at the national level is where policies and maybe interdisciplinary standards like the Institute of Architects or Builders or Country Surveyors can come together and set out certain standards of how they want to adopt certain things, or maybe where you can decide, like accreditation bodies can decide to, enforce BIM in their curriculum. Otherwise, your architects or engineers will not get accredited, okay? And this is also where countries can take leadership, and like UK has taken leadership with BIM level 2 and the rest of it, okay? So quickly, to round this up, let's look at some steps that you need to take towards digital transformation. You can have your usual business as usual, what you normally do every day, all right? Where you have a legacy system, like maybe you're using CAD or just a lonely BIM. And then you look at what are the things you can experiment with. Maybe you can ask your architect to start moving towards a certain technology, or they should work with your structural engineers using a certain kind of technology. So you're now experimenting with a few aspects. Don't just jump into using 4D, 5D. Try a few things with 3D. And then once you have successfully implemented, then you can now start to formalize this. Okay, as from now on, all our 3D will be done using maybe this kind of technology like Revit or Tekla or Bentley, all right? And then you can now start adopting other things, experimenting with 4D and 5D as well, and then formalize that as well. And then you now start to look at strategically, okay, now that we know that this thing works, how do we collaborate with other professional disciplines out there? Because you're not going to work alone, you're going to work with contractors, suppliers. How do we get them to also buy into this BIM thing? Because BIM is like a musical quartet or like an orchestra. All you need is for one person to decide not to use BIM, and then you will ruin the whole thing for everyone, okay? And then finally, you now have a convergence of all these multidisciplinary people coming together to have that common standard, and everybody's happy to work at this particular kind of level of BIM. And then you now start to create new innovations, and you move forward again. Now, whatever you do at these last two stages will become business as usual, and then another innovation will come, and then you start from scratch again. You start to innovate, you start climbing this ladder or these steps and going on. So innovation is a continuous thing. It's not one thing that stops after a point. So just finally, also, I want to compare what this BIM level 2 diagram looks like compared as opposed to what the ISO standard for BIM looks like. The BIM level 2 thing was developed by the UK for understanding how it wants to move forward. But in the global standard, which was derived from past 1192, they've looked at it in a slightly different way, which says you have 3 stages of evolution, but then you can have layers of standardization, layers of technology, layers of information, and layers of business. In summary, what I'm trying to say here is that the business layer at the top is where you need to be. This is where you're actually delivering value, where you're not giving your client as-built drawings. You're giving him an as-built model that maybe has some sensors and integrated things that will help him manage the asset throughout the lifetime, so that when he even wants to demolish the building, he knows where to get the pipes that are hidden, to recycle those copper pipes, for example. Everything is rich and provides him with a day-to-day value that he's using. Because when you do design and construction, that's not the end of the story. Somebody actually uses that building for a business solution, isn't it? So you need to think about a long-term goal. That's the way you can imagine BIM going forward. Yeah. And at the end of the day, whether or not you use the BIM level 2 model or the ISO model, you will have your innovators, your early adopters, late majority, early majority, and your laggards. The barriers that you need to watch out for are things like lack of client demand. People say, yeah, clients are not demanding for BIM. Clients are not demanding for BIM. This is recognized in literature as a major barrier. But I have a problem with this, because if we keep waiting for clients to demand for BIM, It's like patients now telling their doctors what the latest treatment is. We should be the ones telling the clients, this is a better way of working, okay? We shouldn't wait for a client like a government or an employer to tell us use BIM. I don't really buy into this but it's regarded as a barrier anyway. Another thing is affordability or cost of implementation. Some large companies can easily afford to train their staff, buy software, but SMEs will struggle. In fact, sometimes they say you can financially disenfranchise them because they are the ones who will do some of the little things you are doing in your project, but they are not BIM capable. Your capacity in-house or individual, do you have it? Do you need to upskill? This is another barrier you need to think about. All right. If people don't buy into it, they will not be interested in learning and improving themselves. And maybe you have no access to technology. Somebody wants to do BIM, but the software is difficult to find. The hardware is expensive. There's no internet connectivity. People think about BIM in terms of software and hardware, but forget the fact that for you to download an object library or use a common data environment, you need to have reliable internet connection. But people overlook this. It's very, very important for BIM of today. Okay. So imagine someone that is struggling with a data plan just to do WhatsApp messaging and now telling him to now start downloading data for a common data environment. This is a problem. Then lack of standards and policies, whether it's a company standard or national standard, you need to have common ground as a company or as an industry, how you want BIM to work. Legal issues, copyright issues, design liabilities, contractual frameworks, because you have existing contracts and you start to bring in BIM, you have to be aware of how much it will disrupt the existing contract and how you can accommodate that. And then some people just don't know what the real intrinsic value of BIM is. Some people just do BIM because you ask them to do BIM. Why must we do BIM? Is it because it has some long-term sustainability goals? It reduces waste. It makes us work more collaboratively. It saves time, money. What is it that why are we doing BIM? You have to sell that message to people. And then finally, you have cultural resistance and organizational barriers. Some people are just too stubborn. They just don't want to improve. They're just too busy. Like this cartoon here shows, people are cavemen of those days. Maybe they're using a square thing as a wheel to move objects. Now someone is saying, look, guys, use a circle, use a circle. They say, no, we're too busy. You can never be too busy. Anybody that tells you they're too busy to innovate, forget about them. They don't know what they're doing. You can never be too busy to innovate because there's always a better way of doing what you're doing. So we look at some of the global perspective of BIM. We can say that mandating BIM might not necessarily work for some African countries if you look at some of those barriers that I've talked about for many reasons, because some of those barriers like internet connectivity is just a problem. You can't start implementing common data environments if you don't have internet connectivity, reliable and affordable one. Okay, but you don't have to mandate BIM before it's used. That's the interesting thing. In US and other places, it's not everybody is mandated to use BIM. Even in the UK, not everybody is mandated to use BIM. But you can decide to mandate it for a certain region, for example, in Abuja, in Nigeria, or Eko Atlantic City in Lagos. They can decide, for this project, we can mandate the use of BIM, so we can now use it as kind of pilot project to convince the industry about the benefits. And that's how it even worked in the UK. Heathrow Airport was one of those places they mandated the use of 3D object modeling and the rest of that. Now, not every country has mandated BIM. In fact, only a few of them. I'll show you a diagram very soon that gives you an idea of who has mandated and who has not mandated BIM. So don't get carried away with the fact that BIM has been mandated in the UK. It's only government projects that have to use BIM. Okay? And there's some psychological reasons why innovation or maybe BIM might not always be successful. One of them is loss aversion theory, which means, for example, some people like SMEs, if you force them to use BIM, they will use BIM simply because they want to win work. They don't want to lose job. They're not going to do BIM because they want to collaborate. They're not going to do BIM because it's adding value to their way of working or it's sustainable. No, they will use BIM simply because they don't want to lose money. Or some of the obstacles could be pro-innovation bias. Some people will force some innovation down your throat, but they're forgetting the fact that some people cannot afford this technology. There are limitations. So there's something we call pro-innovation bias. Some people are so much driven by BIM that they want to force it down everybody in the industry, forgetting the fact that some of the SMEs or smaller organizations will be challenged by either loss of version or they just can't afford to use BIM because they don't have the manpower, the skill, or the whatever is required. But then there are alternatives like nudge theory. I encourage any of you to Google this that can help you to incentivize the adoption of BIM. For example, you can give people incentives. Like if you use BIM, we'll give you planning approval within 2 weeks, for example. Or we can give you a tax reduction for your facility as a government, for example. Or we can give you free training. Or we'll give you subsidized software on behalf of the software manufacturer. We'll buy it on a subsidized rate and give it to you, okay? So this is what a global picture looks like for BIM adoption across the world. You can hardly see any African country being pointed out because we haven't quite got our acts right, but we're getting there. But you can see that the countries in green have open BIM standards and have maybe kind of mandated BIM. All right, the countries in red have BIM mandates in place. Okay, the countries that are in kind of bluish color have future mandates planned. The ones that are in gray have BIM programs in place. They might mandate it in a way, but they have some kind of BIM strategy in place. And the ones that are in orange are planning to adopt BIM in some time going forward, but they're not quite sure whether they want to just have a kind of strategy or a mandate. Okay. So in summary, it is not enough for you to desire innovation. If you are a laggard or a late majority, you're certainly not innovative. All right. And laggards may be holding your organization down. And in fact, it is you, the person, that might actually be the laggard in your organization, especially if you're a leader, that your laggardness is a problem for everybody. And there's a lot of innovation that's going on in industry, and BIM is just one of them. Remember, this talk is not about BIM alone. It's just that I use BIM as a context to help you understand how innovation is happening. Okay, so BIM, you can say, is one of the most popular innovation in construction industry, but it is definitely not the only innovation that we have today. Okay, so the industry, we can say, is in a state of flux. There's so much this digital disruption going on in today's world of construction, and not all innovations of today will be successful, believe it or not. Not all of them will even be adding value. Some are way ahead of their time, and they will need to make a second coming, like VR. VR came out in 1990s, but it was way ahead of its time. We didn't have the hardware to run the graphics. It was too expensive, but now it's coming back in full force. Okay, so sometimes some of the innovation that you see are ahead of their time. There are solutions looking for problems, but it just takes a while before they become business as usual. So your strategy, not your technology, should drive your digital transformation as an individual or as a company. Okay, so you as an individual, you can map your own BIM journey by having a career plan. What do I want to be like in the next 1 year or 2 years time? Which role model do I have out there that can model my life after or my career? And the organization can plan its BIM strategy, with that very well, so that they don't go down the wrong track, adopting the wrong kind of things, and find out that they wasted their time and money. And you need to consider the needs of your migrants and your natives in your organization in order to work well with them. No one group is good or bad, it's just the way people are. Okay, look at the barriers of innovation. And then to be a leader, you should aim to be an innovator. At the worst case, you should be an early adopter. And there are risks associated with this. You have to understand that. Okay, you have to understand what do you call it, the risks that are associated with adopting BIM. And then there are many angles that you can pick on. You don't have to be innovative in every area. You can pick one or two aspects and excel and innovate, then push the boundaries of this area. Cost estimator, look at 5D BIM technology and data science and see how you can push that boundary. Don't try to go into because you're not really a modeler, isn't it? Thank you very much. Sorry, it took a little longer than I expected, but I hope it was worthwhile. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them right now and answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zed, for the loaded presentation. I'm sure many of us will have to go through this presentation about 2-3 times to have a good grasp of everything you've run through. So thank you very much for your time. So now we'll just quickly run through some questions and answers. And while you're making your presentation, 2 people identified interest to ask questions. The first person is, let me check. The first person that raised his hand was Kayode Kazim. I don't know if you have your questions asked. You can kindly unmute your audio and your video if you want and quickly ask your question. Kayode Kazim.
Yes, Kayode, how are you?
No, it's done.
Oh, it's not on?
No, it's not yet.
Okay, let me look at some of the texts that has been sent here in terms of the chat. They said, can we get the presentation after? I believe so. You're going to have to talk to Moses about that. I believe it should be available to you in a recorded form or in some PDF form or something like that.
Yeah, I think Mr. Donatus also asked a question. I think he asked how you rate.
How do I rate Africa's adoption of BIM? Well, I think in terms of BIM, let's be honest, we are late majority and laggards, but it's not unexpected in terms of if you look at what is required to put BIM in place, technology, the processes, you need to standardize the processes as an organization, as a firm, as an industry, as a trade body or professional society. And you also need to standardize it as a national standard, for example. But then again, there's also the technology that you have to invest in. So for that regard, you can understand why developing countries, and most African countries are developed countries, are struggling to adopt BIM, because some of these things are just not in place. I've talked about internet technology. People don't realize how important it is. If you really want to do BIM, you have to be willing to do BIM common data environment. Can you afford, as a company, to subscribe to BIM 360 or 4 projects for the life cycle of the project? Can you afford the internet connectivity that's reliable? Not that when you log in, you want to upload a model, it takes you 5 hours. So you can understand why I don't really think that we are the early majority yet. We are late majority and laggards. We are getting there, but it's not because we don't want to get there. It's just the constraints that are imposed upon us.
Okay.
Somebody asked, what is the quickest method to mastering BIM Revit? Well, use it. That's the quickest way. Use it.
Okay.
Look for tutorials. I would say look for tutorials, look for video tutorials, preferably so we can see people using it, and then try to apply it in the project. But again, be careful. Don't use it in a project where people are waiting for you to do a BIM model, whereas they're already moving on to construction and they're going to experiment with their project and learn BIM. But there's always has to be that first time. You have to take that dive and try it out. You can't keep learning forever. In fact, your best learning is actually on a real project where you have to really pick up things.
Okay, thank you very much. Then Mr. Abosunde is also raising his hand.
Yes.
I think you can unmute yourself, possibly disable your video and activate your video so if you want to ask a question.
Good evening.
Yes, good evening.
Yeah, my name is Abosunde from Kaduna.
Okay.
Yeah, I always ask questions concerning this BIM and GIS integration. Yeah, because the reason is that I'm actually presently I'm working with a GIS organization. Introducing or discussing with my employer in regard to adoption of BIM, GIS consultancy, government and all that. So I don't know if it is the right thing to do because actually the organization is basically on GIS. Okay. They are not professional. But as a leader, I know that adopting it to, based on the fact they have most of the facilities needed for the adoption and some of the connections with the government and all that.
Okay.
I'm thinking if there is any way I can go to them or I don't know. I just want to introduce it to them, but I just need advice in terms of that.
Okay.
Maybe the advantage, the way I can try to convince them.
Okay.
Because we are dealing with the new generation using the GIS. So the way the adoption of GIS and BIM integration can boost the revenue generation in the state or any state at all.
Okay.
All
right. Okay, please just mute your mic so that I can the echo will not disturb my answer. I would say that if you want to integrate BIM and GIS, first of all, maybe not everyone here knows what GIS is all about. GIS is a kind of system. You can think about it like a geographical system that allows you to capture things that are either like area, like maybe a plot of land, a state, a local government, or a country, or rivers and roads. Essentially, it's a kind of things like BIM. It's just that it's not looking at things from the built environment perspective. It's looking at mostly spatial things that like roads, town, local government, things that are geographical and topography. So you can integrate BIM and GIS, definitely. It can be done. We are getting there. It's not perfect yet, but we're getting there. I think for the last 10 years, people have struggled to integrate them because they were trying to get GIS software to talk to each other. The same way, for example, somebody using Revit can import, using IFC, can import a Tekla or a Bentley model. That I think was a mistake the industry was making. I think the best way to integrate BIM and GIS is to look at the data. The only thing they have in common is the data because they're looking at things from two different ways. BIM is looking at objects in terms of walls, components, floor, slab, concrete, and all the sort. GIS is not doing that. GIS doesn't go to that level of granularity. GIS is looking at the plot of land, the river, the road, and even that plot of land has its own attributes and data behind it. But you can see they're looking at it from, let's say, two different levels of zooming in and zooming out. Okay, so if you can look at how to extract GIS data and how to extract BIM data, then you can make them talk to each other. Not necessarily graphically. Sometimes the way you need to make them work maybe just be using some kind of visualization. Now, there are tools that can allow you to visualize BIM data in GIS format. I won't go into that, but I'm just trying to say that you don't have to think always that you must visualize it in a graphical way. In terms of 3D model, you can look at it in terms of data dashboard or graphs and charts to understand what is happening in these two different systems. It's just the easiest way, in my opinion. Now, another question that has come in is talking about incentive. Do you think incentives will really help spur BIM adoption in Africa? I would say that's probably one of the best ways. for BIM to be adopted in Africa. If you go down the mandate route, it will fail. This is my belief. In most countries, it will fail because we don't have the institutional framework, the national frameworks. We don't have the technology, the financial wherewithal to be able to implement the requirements of BIM. Understand? I made a joke one day when I was talking to some of you guys on WhatsApp, and I said, if you mandate BIM, you have, for example, in some countries, some local government or corrupt people trying to force farmers on that webinar use BIM in a yam ban, and that will not work. So you need to think about the constraints that people are facing in Africa, and I don't think because of those constraints, mandate will work. So maybe we need to incentivize use. What kind of incentives? It all depends from country to country. Okay, from sector to sector. So somebody asked a question. You mentioned that decision needs to be made on which project to use BIM. What level of project do you think is more efficient to deploy BIM for? How can we determine this? Generally, even in the UK, when they started mandating BIM, initially they were like, the project has to be worth around £5 million and above. I think that it's kind of been, it's been like diluted now as much as possible. And they also said they want it to be the project that is centrally procured from the central government. So you can say, for example, in Nigeria or in Africa, that maybe we can mandate or use BIM, not mandate, you can use BIM in a project that is of certain value. If the project is, let's say, worth 100 million and above, for example, Naira, you might use it. Or in dollars, you can say anything from $5 million and above equivalent. That's an example. Or you can say if the project is being funded by, let's say, the federal ministry of a certain size, then they should use BIM. That would be one way of ensuring that the supply chain is encouraged to adopt BIM. Okay?
Okay, Mr. Yekim Fatal Babatunde is raising his hand to ask a question. So you can quickly unmute yourself and ask your question.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hello. Good afternoon, sir. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Please, I want to ask, is there any website or do you have any free tutorial that one can get to tap into this knowledge? And then how can I join this organization? I got the information from a friend of mine. I just logged in, and this is my first time of joining a meeting like this online. So thank you very much.
Okay. I think, Moses, you're in the best position to answer that question about the organization. That's the BIM Africa, right?
Okay, yeah.
Yes, sir.
The person that sent you the link probably just get across to the person and get more information from that person. The person will be able to guide you on how to be part of the organization.
I think you can also put the URL of the website here so that you can maybe click on it and find it. Okay,
I'll BIM Africa here.
Yes, or put it on the LinkedIn page so they know where to find the website of the organization.
Okay. Then, sir, concerning the tutorial, how can one get free tutorial? Because, like you said, I've attended BIM training before, but I'm an architect. During the training, what they did mostly was on QS aspects.
Okay.
And I got to know that, like you have been saying, is quite expensive. So at least for now, if one can be getting into training, at least to put oneself on the road, spending the time that one can afford the expensive training. So do you have any program like that?
Well, in terms of whether we have a program, first of all, I would encourage you to use free resources as much as possible. Okay? There are some free resources out there, like YouTube. If you have access to the internet, you can watch some tutorials there for free. Some of them are already designed in the form of channels. They are like Revit channels where they go through step by step from scratch. They take you through Revit. Then there are some places where you can subscribe to some video training, formal video training. Like, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm with you, sir. I'm with you.
So there's some places where you can subscribe to training, like lynda.com and the rest of that, or even LinkedIn. They have their own, training platform. So you pay monthly or annually or whatever. But then also there are people who do hands-on training. So that you're not only just learning from video, you can also ask questions about your own unique projects and the rest of that. And as it so happens, we're doing a workshop in Ghana sometime in April. I'm going to be one of the resource people, and we will cover a little bit of architectural BIM for those who have never really used it or who want a bit of support. So this will be in Ghana, in 3 cities, Tamale, Accra, and Kumasi. So you're interested, you can find out from me or from Moses. You can join the WhatsApp group and find out where it's going to happen. But
thank you very much.
Yeah, I always encourage. Oh, finally, I think you should also go to Autodesk Academy. I think there's. Let me see if I can find it here. Autodesk have an academy for learning some of their technologies for free. Now, you might not be using Autodesk product, but at least that academy will give you.
I use Autodesk product. I use Revit. I use 3D Max and.
Okay. So Autodesk have an academy where you can learn different things, different software. So let me just show you the website here. It's academy.autodesk.com. All right. You can download some training materials and use it. I'm trying to paste this here. Sorry.
Okay, to quickly ask your initial question on how to join BIM Africa, you can also send an email to info@bimafrica.org.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, I'm trying to
I can see it on the screen. Okay, I can see it on the screen.
I'm trying to, here it is. Okay, so this is the Autodesk Academy. They have free, you have to register, get an account, it's free. And you can download, go to learn, you can see different products or teach. Architecture, engineering, construction management, so some of them cover 3D from architectural perspective, from structural engineering perspective, 4D simulation using Navisworks and the rest of that. All right?
Okay, sir.
So they have exercise files that you can download.
Okay. Mr. Donatus is also raising his hand. You can quickly ask your question.
Hello, Dr. Z. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
You're welcome, Donatus.
Yes, I'm just listening to you. I'm just wondering, do you have universities that do BIM or BIM as a course?
Well, first of all, in the UK, yes. Let me just give a bit of a history. BIM was mandated for government projects from April 2016. Okay, but before that, around 2011 was when the government announced that in 5 years' time, we are going to mandate BIM. Okay? Now, what many universities did was that they rushed and started creating MSc courses on BIM. All right? So people who are already architects, engineers, and construction managers and QSs were rushing to go and register for these programs, and they still exist today, where they're teaching people about BIM. BIM from the strategic point of view, from the operational point of view, or from the design perspective. Some of them specialize in BIM for sustainable design, for example, or BIM for management purposes, or BIM for whatever. So, but at the end of the day, I come from a school of thought that says BIM is not a specialization. You don't need to have an MSc in BIM in today's world. You shouldn't need to, unless you already have a degree and you want to specialize. You want to understand more BIM. BIM should be taught at the undergraduate level, and that's what many universities are doing now. The architecture programs, architecture technology, construction management, they're trying to bring in BIM. So, for example, where I was working before I joined London South Bank University, Loughborough University, we implemented BIM in such a way that as of 5 years ago, we were teaching common data environments when even some master's programs were not even teaching it. We made CAD CAD was outdated. We were not really looking at CAD as anything fantastic. Yes, we taught CAD, but only very minimally. So we brought BIM as much as possible, where we're teaching QS students quantity takeoff, we teach them the principles of material takeoff, but then we move them quickly to Navisworks or to K2 BIM measure or cost X. So they understand how to do it digitally. You understand what I'm saying? When we're teaching construction management, we teach them the normal process of construction management, and then we show them tools that can help them do construction management. So BIM is now gradually becoming embedded into the curriculum of most universities in the UK. In fact, there's a particular interest group called BIM Academic Forum that I'm part of, where we're looking at how to standardize the implementation of BIM. Because you don't want one university to be teaching BIM this way for construction management students, another university is teaching in a different way. So that all the students will have the same quality of learning and the same kind of expectations from employers. So this is what I think will happen now for Africa or for developing countries, because this is a BIM for Africa group, isn't it? How we can do this is not something I want to go into because it's a long story. But I think that to me, it's one of the easiest way to get BIM implemented in Africa, adopted, is to look at education, because most software and technology providers will give you software for free. Again, BIM is not software, but you cannot do BIM without software. So it's one of the most common denominator you must have if you want to do BIM. But if you can get software for free in your education, then that means you can invest in your future generation. You know what I mean? You can now start to train your architects and your engineers so that going forward, in the next 5-10 years, average 4 years to train a QS, or 5 years or so to train an architect. If you start today, 5 years is a long time, but it's also upon us before you know it. You can now have a new generation. Let's say the NIA, Nigerian Institute of Architects, or Nigerian Institute of Quantity Surveyors, all these bodies come together and decide to accredit programs only on the basis of that they've implemented BIM in a way. Give them a timeline that in 5 years' time or in 3 years' time, if you don't put BIM in your curriculum, we're not going to give you accreditation. Believe me, you see a lot of progress. Then we can now start facing, okay, what are the obstacles? They need to buy computers. Many universities now have computers for the architecture students or construction management or whatever. They have these things, but you need that drive. You know, they say one thing, there's something called Newtonian logic based on Isaac Newton's, law of momentum, law of motion. An object will remain at a state of rest unless acted upon by force. All these schools, all these professional bodies, unless you force them, an external force comes in and drives and motivates them, they will not change. There are still schools today who don't want even their students to do CAD. They feel that they are not learning architecture. Yes, they feel that architects are not learning architecture unless they draw with CAD. Believe me, in UK today, CAD is an outdated technology. It's outdated. It's still good, it's still useful. But if you see people using CAD in a proper construction company, maybe for detailing, and even that detailing will be done through Revit or some other way to provide the extra details that you need. You know what I mean? So this is, to me, a low-hanging fruit. One way of getting BIM into implementation into the industries in Africa is to use the professional bodies to help them to come together. Not that architects are doing one thing and engineers are doing different things. Come together, come up with a common platform. What do we need from BIM in our future architects and engineers? Then break it down into the various disciplines so that Nigerian Institute of Estate Surveyors will go to the estate surveying programs and tell them, this is our plan, this is our vision. You better get your students to understand BIM for FM or BIM for estate management. QS will do the same thing. Structural engineers will get the same thing. Architects will get the same thing, same kind of message, but they will apply it in a different way so that we're all on the same page. Like I said, BIM, at the end of the day, it's like a musical quartet, you know, like a group of 4 people singing a cappella, whatever, or an orchestra. If one person is singing off tune, the whole song is ruined. If everybody's doing BIM and then the QS say, you know what, I'm interested in this BIM thing, I'll do my manual takeoff, then you have wasted your time. In fact, let me give you some bad news, actually. I say bad news because in a way, it just tells us that we have not really thought things completely. When you produce 3D models that are data rich, at the end of the day, from Revit or other software, what do you take to site? You take 2D drawings. So you have invested in all these 3D data driven whatever, and then you end up producing 2D sheets. You could have easily done that with CAD.